He says that he knows that Adam Schiff leaked classified information.
Oh.
So in this whole conversation about the handling of classified documents by former presidents and vice presidents, and where does this go next? If that's true, I don't know why Bill Barr didn't investigate it at the time, but that has since passed. But I would like a House committee to take that up, shove it right down Schiff's skinny little neck. Investigate whether or not that what Pompeo is saying is true, and go wherever the facts lead on Schiff, because again, the watchword and the expectation for House Republicans, if they want to be in a position to expand their majority in 24, if Senate Republicans want to be in a position to get the majority in 24, and of course the White House, is you will at least act in furtherance of holding some of these bad actors accountable for what they did. You will dig and dig and dig and go where the facts lead, and you will at minimum present them in a public arena so everybody knows what principal parties did when it came to the Russian collusion hoax, when it came to COVID policy, and a range of other issues. So that's the expectation.
And Devin Nunes said yesterday on Fox, we played some of the interview, but he said that Schiff was even caught on tape reaching out to Russians trying to get nude pictures of Trump and spreading this lie for the past 2 years that he's some Russian spy. But he claims he has it on tape, so we'll see. That would be part of the investigation.
All right. Moving on to our next topic. Funny thing happens when you stand up for yourself, particularly when you're in a position to have impact. That's been the story of Governor Ron DeSantis' tenure as governor of Florida, and he's done it again. Well, we told you earlier in the week that DeSantis told the College Board that Florida will not be part of their pilot program for their new AP African American Studies course because the curriculum is garbage. Here's what he said.
Governor, on the AP African American Studies course that was rejected by the state, been a lot of criticism of that move. People saying, this is exactly what we were fearing with the individual freedom bill. I don't know if you or the commissioner could maybe expand a little bit more about what was in that course.
As you know, in the state of Florida, our education standards not only don't prevent, but they require teaching Black history, all the important things. That's part of our core curriculum. This was a separate course on top of that for advanced placement credit. And the issue is we have guidelines and standards in Florida. We want education, not indoctrination. If you fall on the side of indoctrination, we're going to decline. If it's education, then we will do. This course, so when I heard it didn't meet the standards, I figured, they may be doing serious. It's way more than that. This course on Black history, what's one of the lessons about? Queer theory. Now, who would say that an important part of Black history is queer theory? That is somebody pushing an agenda on our kids. And so when you look to see they have stuff about intersectionality, abolishing prisons, that's a political agenda. And so that's the wrong side of the line for Florida standards. We believe in teaching kids facts and how to think, but we don't believe they should have an agenda imposed on them. When you try to use Black history to shoehorn in queer theory, you are clearly trying to use that for political purposes.
Wow. And the College Board this week agreed to revise their course on African American Studies. Well. Despite all the, he's racist, he doesn't want people to learn about the history of black people in America and so on and so forth. The typical race hustling nonsense. And now the College Board has essentially recanted, and they're going to refashion the curriculum for that course. Now, the devil will be in the implementation. They can polish up the syllabus and then, wink and a nod. What happens in the schools, that will require ongoing oversight. But it just shows you, and because this was just being rolled out and it's not in every state yet, the College Board was clearly worried about, look, if once DeSantis has put a marker down, you're going to see other governors get on board, and now we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem in other states where you've got people similarly inclined to Ron DeSantis in the executive office, and this will become, we'll put ourselves in the middle of a national controversy that we don't want to be a part of. So let's just go back to the drawing board and see if we can satisfy Florida. Good for him. Unfortunately, those examples are too few and far between in terms of what's going on in K-12 and certainly, of course, what's going on in the academy. For more on the latter topic, we're pleased to be joined by Bradley Watson, who formerly of St. Vincent, now at Hillsdale College because of what happened to St. Vincent and at St. Vincent. Bradley Watson teaches in the Van Andel Graduate School of Government at Hillsdale in D.C., and he's the author most recently of Progressivism, The Strange History of a Radical Idea. Professor Watson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Professor
Watson, do we have you?
I think he's trying to talk to us. Professor, are you there?
Professor Watson. Okay, let's take a break and see if we can raise Professor Watson. We'll be right back.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The following is a paid political announcement.
Are you tired of crime on the rampage in Chicago? Is your heart broken that Chicago public schools failed 90% of minority students to achieve reading at grade level? Are you mad that Chicago's world-class reputation has faltered and wounded the love we have for our hometown? Let's save Chicago. This is Vince Colber, a Chicago employer and civic activist, urging you to go to chicagoelections.gov. Do your duty to pick Chicago's leadership. Right now, Chicago is choosing until February 28th candidates for mayor and alderman to solve our crime and public school debacle. Let's save Chicago. Go to chicagoelections.gov. Click on the convenient vote by mail option. Vince Colber here, reminding you to visit chicagoelections.gov, vote by mail as soon as possible. Let's save Chicago.
AM 560, The Answer.
Dan and Amy, we're back, and I believe we have Hillsdale College Professor Bradley Watson. Bradley Watson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, Dan and Amy, delighted to be here. Sorry, we had a bit of a technical glitch. I heard just static when I should have been hearing your beautiful voice, so great to be here.
No problem. A lot of people hear static when they hear my voice, too. It's so strange. So we were talking a little bit about Ron DeSantis standing up to the College Board, and now the College Board agreeing to revise their curriculum for the AP African American Studies course. And it's just an example where somebody stands up and is in a position where they can have impact and is willing to throw down over indoctrination as opposed to education. And lo and behold, you can make some progress. We're just not seeing very much of that these days in K through 12 or certainly on college campuses.
No, this is definitely true. In my own case, I had directed a center on my college campus, which was St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, before I moved to Hillsdale. And I directed this center for many, many years. It was called the Center for Political and Economic Thought, and it was dedicated to the study of freedom, Western civilization, and the American experience. And we would invite many heterodox speakers to campus. Sort of on the conservative, generally speaking, and libertarian side of things. And in the spring of 2022, I organized a major conference, one of the first major conferences we've been allowed to organize post-COVID, on the very topic of politics, policy, and panic, governing in times of crisis. How has America dealt with the kind of series of moral panics over the previous 2 years, everything from healthcare mandates to violence in the streets. So I thought this would be a grand topic, and we'd get people to speak on this. A couple of the speakers really rubbed people the wrong way. One was Scott Atlas, one of the major national critics of COVID lunacy, and another one who particularly drove the administration crazy was a fellow by the name of Professor David Azarad, who gave a talk on against affirmative action, basically, and against various sort of formal and informal cultural privileges that he claimed were doled out on the basis of race. And he had the audacity to title this talk Black Privilege, Racial Hysteria in Contemporary America, playing on of course, the ubiquity of the phrase white privilege. If he just asserted the existence of white privilege, people would have fawned over him and, praised his courage. In any event, the administration went crazy over this talk against affirmative action. They announced the takeover, the effective destruction of this long-standing Center for Political and Economic Thought. And as you suggested, it was the lack of what I would describe as the lack of courage on the part of anyone, including tenured faculty members, in speaking up against this, which sort of left me alone, twisting in the wind until it became apparent that this institution, which had been such a wonderful place for so many years, in my view at least, wasn't worth trying to save from itself. People just immediately collapsed as soon as these, this was a relatively new college president, as soon as these, let's say, people with woke sensibilities on racial questions took over the campus. There were a number of other smaller instances too, but the main thing is, I think, with our institutions, higher education institutions, but corporate institutions, media institutions, they're in free fall, and it's because no one will stand up to these people. No one will be.
Well, what's your story? What happened with you specifically?
Yeah, so I had objected to a number of of things that had happened on campus, and this new president had taken over just before the beginning of COVID, and then there was, of course, a period of sort of crazy lockdowns. But as soon as the masks came off, I think he signaled his support for this kind of wokeness on campus. I had publicly objected to a number of things, including faculty calls for the rejection of colorblindness in favor of race consciousness. This had happened before the conference that I just mentioned. The forbidding of teaching of certain works where what was described as racial epithets appear in these works. Well, as I said publicly in faculty meetings, this would preclude the teaching of Mark Twain, of Flannery O'Connor, of James Baldwin, of many major works, and I teach all through primary sources, the great books of Western civilization, the great political writings of the American tradition. So I said, I'm going to continue teaching these works, regardless of words that you find offensive. And then this conference came along, and as soon as the conference had happened, really before the videos of the conference were even publicly available, the administration issued a letter denouncing the speaker, claiming his remarks, and again, these are remarks criticizing affirmative action and various forms of what the speaker characterized as cultural privileges doled out on the basis of race. He was a critic of this, and the administration claimed this talk could itself be interpreted as a form of invidious discrimination or systemic bigotry. All the buzz phrases of the academic left now. They announced the takeover of the center. Major center donors rightly immediately walked away. People who had supported this center dedicated to the study of freedom, Western civilization, and the American experience realized it was going to be under the complete control now of the administration. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which is one of the major campus and broader free speech watchdogs in the country, described the administration's policy is, the most egregious example of guest speaker censorship they'd ever seen in over 20 years of operation. So, and then, personally, of course, I was denounced. I fielded angry phone calls from college alums, including one which concluded with the exhortation to, quote, "let's blow this man up." I immediately, raised this with the administration, the same administration who had denounced the speaker, and asked if they would denounce such obvious hatred as quickly as they had denounced a guest speaker. There was complete silence from the administration and from my faculty colleagues, for that matter. And these are, grown adults with tenure who will not say anything about this. So as I said, if it weren't for double standards, academia would have no standards at all. So at a certain point in the summer of 2022, I decided, as I said, that, certain institutions, alas, can't be saved from themselves. But I really believe if just a kind of critical mass of people will get together and stand up against this stuff, we could, in fact, eke out some victories. But people are just seem congenitally unwilling to do this. Academics don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a rather customary story, unfortunately. Now, it would be if we were talking about an Ivy League school or someplace like Northwestern, but this is St. Vincent in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, which was one of those schools that used to be mentioned on the same list as Hillsdale and University of Dallas, and other such schools, Thomas Aquinas.
Yes,
and it's Benedictine. And so I've got a story about my high school to share with you in Illinois. And the president of the university is a priest. So and by the way, in conservative scholars, I mean, people like Peter Wood, National Association of Scholars, talked about the center that you ran there as like a crown jewel of, free thought and focus on, the great works of Western Civ and so forth. And then it just goes like that. It goes up like a Roman candle. So what happened there with the board that would install a president, a priest, who would behave in the manner that he behaved and allow what happened to happen? I mean, there has to be, it seems to me that this moment that you've described after this conference, and by the way, it's not like everybody knows who David Azarette is in that community. They're saying things they know to be untrue because they're under pressure. But where is that pressure coming from? How was that pressure allowed to be brought to bear? How did you lose the faculty there? People must have seen that coming for some time and did nothing. It didn't just happen overnight, and it all presented itself after that conference.
Yeah, this is a very good question. I mean, I describe my situation as kind of sort of perfectly given the speed with which it unfolded, as perfectly telling the story of the collapse of our institutions. This happened over a roughly 2-year time horizon. As I say, this new president came on board just before the advent of COVID. I think it was in the fall of 2019. Then, of course, COVID turned everything on its head. St. Vincent College, on his watch, went through the full, COVID masking madness and Zooming courses and so forth. So you couldn't really get a perfect read on the situation. But then when the summer of 2020 came along on top of COVID, and there were, riots and actual insurrections in places like Portland and Seattle, of course, this spread to the, the leftist faculty members on campus who started to call for, as I mentioned earlier, the rejection of color blindness and holding the institution accountable for...
Yeah, but how did all these people get there? How were they installed in the first place?
Yeah, well, the faculty had been there. The faculty who advocated for these kinds of things had been there prior to the new president. So they, although we have a cohort of kind of conservative Western Civ-oriented faculty, they're not they're not the majority at St. Vincent by any means. The faculty lean left, but the thing is, the administrations had always been very sensible. This is the oldest Benedictine college in the country, really the foundation of the Benedictine order in North America, and the administration had really allowed the place to have open and heterodox arguments presented on campus. It wasn't until this new president in particular,
right? So where did he come from, and where's the board of trustees? Who's on the board of? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get to where is anybody who can see this train coming up the track saying. Hey, folks, there's no way we're going with this guy. We're getting rid of these people. This is an institution we're going to preserve consistent with its heritage and its stated mission, or we're not, and this is the moment where we need to make that decision.
I place the blame ultimately squarely on the board. A number of our board members are people of the left. One of them attended this particular conference. Her name was Bibiana Birio. She's a failed Democratic Party candidate for Congress in Pennsylvania, and she described the most controversial talk as rage-inducing speech. In other words, in my view, in the view of many, you can interpret that as licensing rage as a response to speech. The chairman of the St. Vincent board is none other than the chairman, the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Art Rooney, Jr.
My God.
And he, of course, is therefore is the keeper of the Rooney Rule, affirmative action in the NFL. So,
Rooney, the Rooney family. There it is. There's the responsible party. you know,
a lot of people think that's got something to do with it, but can you
yeah.
prove it?
Well, there it is. There's so Benedict Academy, which is where I went to high school in suburban Chicago in Lisle, Benedictines, and they had this moment where they fired a lacrosse coach because she lied on her job application. She's a lesbian. She lied on her job application. She didn't disclose that she, had a relationship that was inconsistent with Benedictine values as per the employment contract. But she lied on her job application. That's the point. And so she's fired. Then there's a hue and cry from a small group of people, and they reverse the decision. And this appointed board, which has no real power. I mean, it's not, they don't have policymaking authority. It's run by the Benedictines. It used to be. They rubber stamped it, and they just steamrolled the Benedictines, and the Benedictines, who have control of the school, along with the local diocese, they abdicated. They would not exercise the power they had in that moment to defend who they said they are and who they said and what they said this school was organized and instituted to accomplish. And so they're gone, and Benedict's like an independent Catholic school now that's going the way of all these other liberation theologist institutions. And it's just, I mean, if you the most galling thing about the culture now is that those who know and those who have made a life commitment to the truth through, for example, the priesthood, will not stand up to the mob. It is the most amazing thing to watch as the Catholic Church and so many Catholic schools are cannibalized by the left.
Yes, indeed. As I said, our institutions are in free fall, and it comes down to, it's not so much on college campuses or anywhere, really, I think an intellectual crisis. Sure, there is an intellectual crisis. The wrong things are being taught by the wrong people in the wrong way. But it's fundamentally a moral crisis. The lack of the moral virtue of courage is behind the collapse of our institutions. In the case of St. Vincent, there were people on the board who were pushing in the leftward direction. There were people on faculty who were pushing in the leftward direction, but there were people in both of those places who were not down with this, some of whom on the faculty side expressed to me that they were appalled by what the president was doing, but they would say nothing publicly, and this is our problem. It is a moral problem, fundamentally.
He is Professor Bradley C.S. Watson. Speaking of C.S. Lewis, encourages the formation of every virtue at its testing point, right? Bradley C.S. Watson teaches at the Van Andel Graduate School of Government at Hillsdale College in D.C. His book, Progressivism, The Strange History of a Radical Idea. Professor Watson, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
And Amy, thank you for having me.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up on Chicago's